Once upon a time, in a small town on the outskirts of the city, there was an old abandoned house that no one dared to enter. People claimed that they had seen creepy figures lurking behind the broken windows, heard eerie whispers and screams in the middle of the night, and felt an unexplainable presence that made their skin crawl. One day, a group of teenagers decided to explore the house and figure it would be a fun adventure. They used an old crowbar to pry open the front door and entered the house, despite the eerie feeling that surrounded it. As soon as they stepped inside, their flashlights flickered and started to die out, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. They decided to split up and explore different rooms, hoping to find some interesting clues one by one. Each member of the group encountered something that made their blood run cold. One saw a ghostly hand pressing against a window. Another heard whispers coming from behind a closed door, and another felt an icy breath on the back of their neck. As they regrouped, they realized they were not alone in the house. A dark shadow drifted towards them. With glowing eyes that shone like diamonds, they tried to run, but the shadow seemed to be all around them, making its way towards them. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The shadowy figure disappeared. The whispers stopped, and the lights came back on. The teenagers were relieved, but confused by the sudden change. As they made their way towards the front door, they noticed an old book on the ground. Curiosity got the best of them, and they decided to take a closer look. Inside the book was a mysterious message that read, "Beware of what you seek, for it might just find you." The teenagers shrugged it off as a harmless message and left the house, thinking they were lucky to have escaped. However, as they walked back home, they noticed that the shadowy figure was following them. It seemed to be alive, like a creature that had been awakened by their presence in the house. In the end, none of them could explain the mysterious shadow that had followed them home, leaving everyone wondering what really happened in that old abandoned house. In the heart of the forest lay an abandoned cabin that had become the source of local legends. No one knew who had built it or what had happened there. Villagers whispered in hushed voices about terrifying screams and strange sightings around the cabin, urging travelers to avoid it at all costs. Despite the warnings, a group of 4 friends decided to go camping and explore the cabin. As they drew closer, the hairs on their arms stood up, and the forest grew eerily silent. A thick mist enveloped the area as they approached the cabin, making it hard to see anything. The cabin was old and weather-beaten. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling off the wood. The front door was unlocked, and they pushed it open with a creak, brushing aside cobwebs as they entered the dark, damp room. A musty smell filled their nostrils, making them feel sick. As they placed their bags down, they heard strange whispers coming from above. They looked up, but nothing was there. They nervously laughed, trying to shake it off, but the unnerving feeling continued to linger. They decided to go out and explore the forest while they waited for nightfall. As the sun set, they returned to the cabin to find it looking even more ominous. In the flickering light of their campfire, they saw figures moving around outside the cabin. The whispers started again, growing louder and more intense, and the shadows grew longer as the night closed in. Suddenly, the cabin floor shook and the walls began to rattle. The friends were thrown onto the ground, struggling to make sense of what was happening. A low growl began to emerge from the darkness, and they heard footsteps coming closer and closer. In the silence that followed, an old man appeared before them. His eyes glowing with an ethereal light, he urged them to leave the cabin and never return, warning of the dire consequences that awaited them if they didn't. Trembling with fear, they left the cabin and stumbled through the forest back to the safety of their homes. They never spoke of their experience again, haunted by the memory of that terrifying night. As time passed, more stories emerged about the cabin, adding to the mystery and fear that surrounded it. The villagers whispered about supernatural forces and ancient curses, and the cabin thrived as the center of every ghost story told under the stars. And the old man who had warned them, nobody knows who he was or where he came from. Some believe he was the ghost of the cabin's original owner, while others think he was a guardian spirit trying to protect the forest from trespassers. No one ever ventured back into the cabin after that fateful night, and although the stories continued to grow, no one could ever explain the strange happenings that occurred within those walls. Years later, the cabin was finally torn down by the villagers, but the legends lived on even now. People occasionally still report strange sightings and eerie whispers in the forest, reminding them of the cabin's dark past. And the four friends, they went their separate ways, each carrying the memory of the cabin with them. They never fully understood what had happened that night, or what was truly lurking in the shadows. But they knew one thing for certain: that cabin was more than just an abandoned building, but a place shrouded in fear and mystique, a place to be avoided at all costs. In the heart of the deep forest of New England, there was an old abandoned mansion that had long been forgotten. The mansion was once the home of a wealthy family that had fallen on hard times, and they were forced to sell it. Since then, the mansion had remained abandoned and had earned a reputation as one of the most haunted places in the region. One day, a young couple visited the town and learned about the mansion's legends. They decided to visit the mansion and spend the night, hoping to experience the supernatural events that were rumored to occur there. Unfortunately, what they encountered was more than they bargained for. As they arrived at the mansion, they felt an eerie sense of foreboding. The mansion loomed over them, casting an ominous shadow in the moonlight. The couple pushed the heavy wooden doors open and stepped inside. The air was icy cold and still, except for an occasional gust of wind that whispered through the corridors. As they explored the mansion, they heard strange whispers and creaking floorboards, but no one was there. They wondered if they should have listened to the warnings they'd received about the mansion, but they brushed their fears aside, thinking it was all just their imagination. Soon after, they began experiencing unexplainable phenomena. Doors would slam shut, even though there was no one around. The couple heard knocking sounds coming from within the walls, and ghostly apparitions walked through the halls. The apparitions appeared to be members of the former owners' family, and they wore the elaborate clothing of an earlier era. As the night wore on, the couple became terrified as the events grew increasingly intense. They heard footsteps coming from the upper floors, and there was no mistaking the sound of heavy breathing. They began to wonder if they would ever make it back home alive. Just as suddenly as the events started, they stopped, leaving the couple standing alone in the dark and empty mansion, confused and bewildered. They left the mansion, grateful for the safety of the open air outside. They never talked to anyone about what they had experienced, for fear of ridicule by skeptics, but they never forgot the terror they had experienced that fateful night. To this day, no one knows what happened in the mansion, but the creepy tales about the haunted mansion continue to be whispered throughout New England.